You can't remember when you stopped being able to sleep, but you miss it. That sweet, soundless space where your brain clicks off and your eyes close and your body loses feeling. When you were younger, your mother said you could fall asleep anywhere. The floor of your father's office, the waiting room chair at the dentist, the back seat of a car. Especially the back seat of a car. She used to drive you around in circles for hours, your mother, to get you to sleep as a baby. Then it became like a light switch anytime you got into a moving vehicle. On 1 minute, off the next. Now you lie cramped in the corner of a bottom bunk bed, wide awake, searching the sky through a window for stars. There are so many more stars out here than there were in the city where you came from. Your parents were what they call homebodies. They never took you on trips, so you've never seen a sky so big before, so full of pinpricks of light that seem close enough to touch, but are actually so far out of reach. Maybe that's why they never left home, you realize now. Because this feeling of longing those stars give you, this ache beneath your skin, wasted on wanting, it feels good sometimes. But it hurts too. Homebodies is a good word for how you think of them now when you do remember they exist. Bodies left at home. You know they must have had personalities, preferences, pet names they called you. You remember, like the long, lingering flavor of the hard, sugary strawberry candies you suck at the back of your mouth, that they must have loved you. You don't think they were ever terribly cruel, but you don't really know that for a fact anymore. Because that's all they are, bodies. Flesh and bone left behind alongside an ugly plaid couch and a standing mixer. The girl who sleeps beside you tells you daily that you love a dog named Winnie. Winnie, she says, after Winnie the Pooh, which you loved as a kid, or maybe love now, because you aren't that much older than a kid, after all. Too bad you don't remember what Winnie the Pooh is, either. But Winnie, the dog, you can imagine. Curly-haired and compact, excited eyes and a wide mouth spread into a pant that looks like a smile. You wonder if she spends her days on your bed, waiting for you to walk back through the door. Her curly head resting on her paws, her expressive eyebrows jumping at every sound that could mean you. Would she still remember the sound of your voice? Your smell? Does that linger for dogs, even after you're long gone? The girl who sleeps beside you is small and bony with hair and pigtails that scratches your face when she turns over in her sleep. She has a name that begins with T, or maybe E, you can't remember. She had a sister that something terrible happened to. You were supposed to remember, but you've forgotten. She knows that you've forgotten, you think, but she doesn't ever call you out on it. She's hard on the edges, bony and scratchy like her body and her hair, but she has a soft spot inside. That's why you started talking to her on the bus in the first place, this girl who sleeps beside you. Unlike the other girls, when she looked at you, you saw it right there in the centers of her eyes. The soft spot she doesn't want anyone to see. You could be her soft spot, you thought to yourself. You realized something the second you saw her, this girl who sleeps beside you. You realized that even though you left home, you didn't really want to be alone. Your eyes are sore when you close them. You will it to happen, the sleep, but that only makes it worse. It's just another thing you want and can't have. Another thing that feels beyond your control, another mystery of your own body. When he comes, it isn't a surprise. You think you might have willed it, too. And who's to say you didn't? Who knows what you can do? That's what you've learned from being around all these girls, all these other Westward women. They think you're just staring into space these days, but actually you're watching them. You watch them to learn about yourself. They all act like they're too sick to think, like they're under some spell of compulsion. But these feral bodies, this wild state, can be a choice, too. If your body is being compelled by something unseen, fungus or hormones or God, it might not be within your control, but it's not within anyone else's either. Not even the man looming above you now, blocking out the stars. Now that it's all over, there's only one thing you wish someone would know. One thing, and this is it. That you got out of that bed all on your own. That you followed him out of that cabin all on your own. It wasn't that you trusted him. You'd realized sometime a long while back that he was doing what your mom used to do, driving you around in circles, trying to get you to sleep. And you knew that you couldn't hide from him forever among the other girls. But you also wanted to get closer to the stars. You wanted to stop this itch for something you can't have. You wanted to stop feeling as if everything was beyond your control. You wanted to stop being a mystery even to yourself. You wanted it, them, yourself, everything to just stop. You know what you want, but he doesn't seem to. He's muttering and cursing and spitting like a rabid dog, arguing with himself. Must get it out, he says. Out, out, out. He spent so much time acting like he knew better than you, like he could contain you, like he was going to do what was right. It's comforting, here at the end, to know that he wasn't and he couldn't and he didn't. He's holding a knife, but sharp things have always scared you. You hated watching your dad take a fish off its hook, for example, tearing its flesh at the mouth, watching its limp flops as it clung to life despite the guts draining into the creases of his fingers. You look around and see the rifle nearby. When you catch his eye next, you nod to it. That'll get it out, you say. That'll get it out faster than scratching it will. And he smiles. As he goes to get it, you stop looking at him and you look up at the stars instead. There are so many of them that they can't possibly all have names. But sometimes 3 or more of them will move in constellations that, together, have meant something to people for years and years and years. And that's something special, isn't it? You know you should run, but instead, you place your hands on the belly he's now aiming at. You wonder what's in there, really. It isn't whatever he seems to think it is. Maybe, you realize, it's a homebody. A body that is also a home. It is yours and no one else's. Even now, even here, even like this. You remember the sound, but you don't technically remember the shot. By then, you are already sleeping. On 1 minute, off the next.
You're listening to Books on the Bed, where I travel through the country asking our hosts, if I came to your town and stayed at your house, what books would you put on my bed? Each host will share 6 books for me to carry with me on the journey of my life. And I'm here to share those books with you. As we go, we're building a digital library with every book put on every bed across the country. And who knows, maybe someday, the world. We are trying to share as many diverse stories as possible to part a curtain between us and bring us closer to each other. We hope these books and conversations make a meaningful difference in your life. Thank you for listening and being with us on this journey. Whew. Man.
It's a bummer to start there, really.
I know. But it's also like, this chapter is indicative of why I love this book, and I realize too, a lot of the moments I get chills reading this novel is when you're talking about stars. That's just something that I picked up on in the 2 times that I've read it. But this one was just like, oh God, it's so good.
You know what's funny about that star comment? I hate stories about space. And it's because I always think it's about selfish ambition. But maybe that's why I wrote about stars, is because even from the ground, people look up to the stars for what they want. There's an ambition to that you just can't stop wanting it, even though it's out there. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's this, because the other moment when Amy's in the national park, there's another moment with the star.
That's also about wanting. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's just I picked up on that, and those were really, to me, those were momentous occasions in the book. So I was like, okay, well, I want to pick out something that really just felt like, okay, this explains a lot of why I love this book. It's crazy that you just moved up the road and wrote a novel this good. And now I get to be here with you. It's awesome. This is why my life is great. It's because I get to do this. But yeah, that chapter, just there was a lot of points in the book where I both wanted to continue immediately, but also linger with the feeling of what she just wrote gave me,
That's very kind. I think the experience right now of hearing someone who's as strong a reader as you are talking to me about it is pretty special, because I haven't talked to that many people about it yet. And so hearing a reader's response like that is yeah, it's making me rethink even what I wrote. It's great.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's special. I can't believe that this book's going to be out there. We're going to move units at City Lights with this one. I can tell you that much.
We are grateful to you.
I just can't wait. Yeah, this is so exciting. And it feels like, destiny. a lot with these things. Like you and I were meant to meet. You were meant to move here. You were meant to write this book. I was meant to love it. And I'm just glad you're part of this community because, like, you know, there's a lot of really good writers in Appalachia, Western North Carolina, but I think you've given us a very different story to add to that collection of great books.
That's very generous to say. We were really thrilled to move here primarily because we know that it's such a great literary community. And, you know, I grew up in North Carolina, but not this part of North Carolina. This was always the part of North Carolina I wanted to be in, you know, when you're growing up elsewhere and you're like, oh, but the mountains. Yes, right. It's looking at the stars, looking at the mountains. So
we're all suckers for it.
I remember when and you know, for listeners, I moved here because I got a job at Western Carolina University in Western North Carolina. And my process when I was applying for that job is I applied and I was like, man, that would be too perfect, wouldn't it? I was pregnant. We were about to start a family. And I was like, that would be a great place to do that. And I just thought, oh, it's never going to happen. But like you said, sometimes it just works out.
Well, it's kind of funny too. Like I still think often about, part of the reason I love meeting authors, I mean, you know this, we just talked about it. I think it's important to let authors know when they've written something special that has touched my heart and that makes me want to keep reading and sharing books. You know, it's my life. And so like there's these books that come along where you're just like, oh my gosh, this is just like perfect for what I wanted. So when I read your book the first time and I texted you when you were still in New Jersey, it was just like kind of one of those moments that I love that happens. Is when people become friends through a book. And in this case, it's yours, which is different for the writer than it is for the reader. But it's just like, you know, there's a lot of movement behind this book for me, which makes this meeting and like being able to be friends with you and be in your home. Like it's special to me when this happens.
Even that text was kismet because you texted that. So I was teaching in New Jersey. We were getting ready to move. I had a 2-month-old and we were packing up our apartment in Brooklyn and Matt texts and I was like, oh my gosh, someone in North Carolina already knows us, you know, and already cares. And that felt like the best way to possibly move. So I can't thank you enough for that. But again, timing, kismet. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. And so you wrote a banger of a book. I'm going to sell a lot of it, but in thanks before that, you know the deal. I got to give you your gifts.
I almost forgot. This is so nice that you do this.
And so there's 2 gifts for you, one for your son. So we're going to start with the gifts for you. One of them, I'm not sure if I've talked about this book with so many people because I love her so much as a writer and I love this novel. So I'm not sure if we've talked about it or not. So if you have it, that's okay.
Okay.
Because
that's even better because it was the right kind of
I have a backup plan. But it is 2, which one is it now? I think it's this one. If it's not, we'll reroute. But it's 2 on the nose for the book you just wrote. Different storyline, but same spirit.
Okay.
And so
I might. We'll see. I think I might, but might have it. But I will say I was told about your wonderful wrapping job. I feel like everyone has to comment on it now because nobody can see it. It's really good.
It is like a requirement.
No, I don't have it. Yay. Is this not the run?
Oh, wait. No, this is a different one.
This is the alternate?
No, it's not the alternate. I have 2 and then an alternate.
Okay, well, I don't have this.
I have 3. The other one is not an alternate. It just can be an alternate for if you have this. So this one, Elizabeth Crook is my favorite Western writer alive today. And I was like, oh man, maybe I'll get you one of the more Western-y of her Western books because she's in Texas. She writes all about Texas, but this is actually the one that leaves Texas, the only novel. So the Night Journal, the reason I picked this one is because the protagonist who goes to New Mexico with her grandmother to, you know, the site of her family's origin in the Southwest, she has a lot of the same characteristics of Amy, but then also like quite a few of the other characters in your novel. So there's like in this woman, I recognized a similar interior life and choices she's trying to make and struggles that she's having. But I just thought this was such a beautiful novel of she's resisting reading this book that her grandmother wrote about her family's history in New Mexico at the Pecos Pueblo. And so she's like, I do not want to read it. I don't want to know about it. Like I'm resisting it. But then there's these circumstances where her grandmother has to go back because there's these like, there's an archaeology dig going on and she has to like give the okay. And so anyway, this woman has to go with her. And it's like the worst thing. She has to go with her grandmother that she has a just fraught relationship with. She has to go back to this origin site. And then also she starts uncovering just all these things about her family. And then it goes like way, way further than you think it would. So there's a lot going on in this book, but at the heart of it is these characters that are struggling with, at least with her, like being stuck and like feeling like she needs to do something, but she doesn't know what. And now she has to because of these circumstances. And even the relationship between Eve and William.
Yes.
And her boyfriend in this are like very, very on the nose. So anyway, The Night Journal by Elizabeth Crook. I just think there's so much that the feeling's similar. Different story, though.
This is crazy that I've never heard of this because as soon as I unwrapped it and saw the title and there's something here about the West there's a Western Writers of America badge, I was like, this is so up my alley and up this book's alley. It's astonishing. There's like the Western element, then journal. We're going to talk a lot about family journals today. I
didn't know that, but
yeah,
it just felt like something you would appreciate. So yeah, I'm glad. And if you like this, I have actually an Elizabeth Crook bookshelf at my house, like one particular part of my bookshelf just for her books.
That's how you know you've made it, is if someone dedicates a bookshelf to you in their house.
For her episode, I walked into her office in Austin, Texas, in her house, and it was literally stacks of books on the floor of Texas history. So there's just like, yeah, she's great. I think you'll love this book. It's beautiful writing.
A perfect pick. Even more perfect than you might know. So
well,
we'll hear more about that later.
Sometimes it all works together.
Okay, so this was the original one you were referring to that I may already have. We're going to find out.
I can never remember.
I don't think so. No. You did it again. Okay. No, I have not.
So check this out. Call It Horses is its own story of the itch. It is 3 women who are so unlikely to be in the same car together going to Abiquiu, New Mexico. So one of them is this woman who is stuck in her marriage, stuck in her life. She doesn't know what to do. She's not really ever had a chance to be her own self, and it starts in West Virginia, where Jessie Van Eerden, Call It Horses, is the book. Jessie grew up in Preston County. She's one of my favorite writers who's ever lived. I'll put her up with Cather and Welty and Dykeman and everybody else. She's incredible. And Pancake.
You're Mount Rushmore.
And Pancake suggested this book to me.
Oh, wow.
After I ambushed her in City Lights when she was here for the Lit Fest a couple years ago. But Call It Horses is about, so that woman who has to take her aunt, who's like an autodidact kind of pariah of the community, just a difficult, smart woman who raised this girl, and now she wants to die in the desert of Georgia O'Keeffe. And so they're setting out to do this road trip. But then here comes along this other woman that they don't expect to come with her because she's in her own version of this, I need to leave no matter what, and I don't even care where we're going or what we're doing. So it's its own version of Westward Women. It's just 3.
Yeah, and I mean, I love a road trip novel. I've been trying. I'm creating a syllabus for a class on like the American road trip novel for next semester.
Annie Hartnett.
So I know.
And
so, right. And so you're just helping me write my syllabus right now. Secretly, I do these class themes so that I can have an excuse to read all the books that I want to read. But that is fascinating. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's so good, and like it's a heady book. I mean, she is like probably Charles Baxter level intimidating with like her brain,
Yeah.
Like she is so smart. It seems like she's read everything. And this novel can be a little bit of, I think you'll appreciate how it's written. Some people will not. They might get weighed down by it or like have trouble breaking through, but I think you will not.
Well, I was just reading, the back just mentions that at least one of the characters is recording the journey in letters. So letters and journals, again, way more relevant than you might think to what I'm interested in.
Now that I'm thinking about this is kind of crazy that this theme has come up because, yes, this is all letters from one to the other, one person to the other. Actually, letters to, So it's letters to someone who's not even part of the story.
Yeah, I'm so jazzed about this.
So the story's going from, like you're hearing it because it's being told to someone else. And what I realized is Elizabeth Crook, not in the Night Journal, but her most recent novels, The Witch Way Tree and The Madstone, which are the same protagonist 3 years later.
Oh, interesting.
And connected stories. So those are both written as letters.
Wow.
By the same protagonist when he's a teenager. And so like the Madstone, the most recent, is a letter from him to this child that he meets on the 1800s road trip, though, from Comfort, Texas to, it's like...
I'm like tearing up right now at the Kismet. I don't know, Matt, have I ever told you about the fact that I was inspired to write Westward Women based on my mom's letters from her road trip in the 1970s?
I did not know this.
Yes.
No, that's not surprising, though. It's not surprising.
We can talk about it more when we get into the books on the bed. But honestly, the fact that this kind of manuscript culture, like the journals and the letters are part of this, is like a huge part of my life. And so I'm really excited about this.
So I read your manuscript dissertation.
No, you read my dissertation from my PhD program? Matt, you're the only person in the world who's done this.
And maybe that's why I unintentionally picked these authors who are obsessed with letters.
Yeah.
And writing in letter form or about letters.
I'm like crying. You read my dissertation.
I'm in business.
God help you. That's
love
incredible.
having fun. This is fun to me. Mm-hmm. Most people would probably be like, "You're crazy," but
well, I will be forever grateful
for every author. I need to know what they write about, and that includes dissertations, because there's some really interesting things in that dissertation, clearly, that connect to like this idea of women and their lives being in letters and verses and things that they write in each other's albums. Like I ended up on a whole thing about manuscript writers in the Latin West, like from 400 to 1300 CE, that like were responsible for like over 100,000 manuscripts being written because you thought it was all male monks. Whoa. But then I was like reading all these articles. So now I'm like, it's like 1 a.m. I'm sitting on my couch in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains, and I'm like, why am I doing this?
Well, I'm glad that that's where it led you, because I will be the first to say that reading somebody's PhD dissertation is not always a good time, even if the ideas are interesting. But if it leads you to those things,
the thing
then
is,
that's good.
I was a history student. Not everything was riveting or entertaining, but it sparks your curiosity.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's like that's kind of wild because, yeah, both of these writers have these books. They're both Western. Or west, going west.
Women, Western women.
Yeah, I'm going to need to get you the other two Elizabeth Crooke novels, because the first one, The Witchway Tree, not the Madstone, the one before it, when Benjamin is younger, he is writing a letter to a judge to tell the story of a crime he witnessed, and the main plot of the story where he and his half sister are going to avenge the death of her mother, his stepmother, because she was killed by a panther in the Texas Hill Country.
Yeah.
But he's telling the story of both of these things through letters to a judge. Mm-hmm. And the judge gives him his first pen ever. So like this is the genesis of him like writing his story. And like what's even crazier is Elizabeth got that voice of Benjamin through journals that a soldier wrote in the 1800s in Texas.
And that's how I teach. Well, that's the kind of stuff I love, because that's where you find voice. That's how I teach voice in my fiction classes. Is we read my poor mother and aunt. We read my mother and aunt letters from them, and because then they have to without them knowing they're my mother and aunt, and they have to characterize them because it's people write differently in relation to different audiences. And when you're writing letters, you're writing to an intimate audience, and so the you that comes out in that. And that form, it's unique and it's voicey and it's not just you, it's you in conversation with that specific other person. Yeah. And I think that's a really special alchemy that you get in manuscripts.
It makes sense now that this is all coming together, that the journals became a theme, because I did pick both of these books after I read the dissertation. Okay. And I didn't think journal.
Right.
I think it was just all of it. Right. But the journal aspect makes sense. And so the third one that could have been an alternate for Call It Horses if I'd already given or like told you about that, but I'm going to get it for you anyway when it comes this summer, because I just read the arc of it not long ago. But the reason I chose it, I need to say, is because of something in your dissertation that I read. Is there no type on earth to find, the kindred heart, the feeling mind, has love the only claim? There is a sympathy as strong, a type that binds and lasts as long, and friendship is its name. So I recently read a book coming out on June 2nd from Penguin called Girl's Girl by Sonia Feldman, debut writer out of Cleveland, Ohio. I occasionally say, Matt, read something that you would never pick up on a shelf because you think it might be not for you. And this was about these three friends, best friends in high school in Ohio, Northeast Ohio, which already is in Ohio, and I'm in there. But one of the girls is learning that there's a distinction between the type of love she has for one of her friends versus the other. And then they end up kissing, and it kind of sets off this crazy chain of events, like in a formative 15-year-old summer of friendship and love and sexuality and her relationship with her mother. I devoured that book. It is so good. So that's yours when it comes to City Lights, because I just thought about like a story of friendship. It's not unlike Westward Women and the idea of what binds women, and their shared experiences. And it's something a man cannot understand.
Yeah, the complex layers to those relationships where maybe even the woman herself doesn't, I liked what you said about the part of it is her realizing the differences in those relationships and what, the kind of different forms of intimacy are in that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love that because of the complexities of those relationships, sometimes the woman or women involved in them themselves aren't totally sure what form it's taking as it's emerging.
Yeah.
And the section from the dissertation you read, that was a poem from an autograph album, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah. And the autograph albums are all about that kind of complex, flexible intimacy between women. I mean, also sometimes between men. Yeah. And it's that's what drew me to them, because it's women on the cusp of womanhood, right? They're like girls becoming women. So I think that book sounds like it's perfectly in conversation with that.
I recently reached out to Sonia, and I accept that every time I reach out to someone, they may not get back to me or want to do it or whatever. Maybe this is me trying to put something into the world that I need her. I need to interview her. I thought it was going to be sort of like these poppy books, kind of like Mos Def called Drake shopping music, music you hear at Target. And that, obviously causes a stir for Drake fans. But I agree. I mean, I think there are some books that are just purely meant to
they're popcorn,
delight or be dramatic as all get out. But
and there's no problem with that. That takes a lot of skill too.
Totally.
Yeah.
But what Sonia does here is take this story that could be like pretty annoying. And there are paragraphs where she asks a set of questions that a 15-year-old is just asking themselves, doesn't answer them, but like they just stop you in your tracks. It's a very philosophical book. And it's both about her love and friendship and growing up, but like the times where she's contemplating for the first time, she's looking at these pictures of her mother and when she was younger, and she was like talking through how she thought these pictures were just there to make up a story that her mother was a person before, but she's realizing like my mother was in this moment every time. Just coming to terms with all of these things as you're growing up, and it's just delightful. It's so good.
Well, if you do get in touch with her, then after you invite her to do all these wonderful things, you got to tell her that I have to be in conversation with her somewhere, because clearly we should be. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I invited her to City Lights. So, shouts out Rust Belt authors, but that book just blew me away.
Yeah.
I'm loving these books where men are not the focal point. The friction between a relationship with a man is not the focal point, Like even with your book in The Piper.
Well, and I never wanted him. I wrote a draft of this book where he didn't exist, actually. Yeah. And then I ended up putting him in because I was like, oh, there needs to be the true crimey plot, right? That you've got this going on. But even throughout the book, he's like the guy in the rearview mirror that all the women are just kind of like, oh yeah, he's here too, and I don't think it's a spoiler. You were asking me, is it okay to read that part? Because you were like, is it a spoiler? I don't think it's a spoiler that he's a bad dude. I didn't want it to be a twist. That's not the twist.
Oh, no one was surprised by that.
Right,
it's like actually inevitable.
It's incredibly boring, right? Of course, this man is not what he says he is, right? But that surprises no one. There's nothing of interest in that, right? What's interesting is the women that are kind of on this trip together that he is just trying to insert himself into. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of parallels with all these books. I think you'll love them. And, this gets me to like, with the connections between what you wrote back, in grad school, all the way, your short stories are delightful. That mall short story was on Mall 2004 was so good. I loved it. Maybe it's because I'm also a mall.
Like hiding that you read these short stories.
Oh,
that I
come
wrote
on.
So long ago.
Yeah, but they're good. Like it reminded me of Emily Mester's nonfiction book, American Bulk, where she writes a whole story of her and her girlfriend going to the mall. It's called Mall Sad. And so like there was some kinship between that story, despite yours being fiction. And so
malls are a special place, and they're kind of becoming an extinct place, but they were a very special place for a certain age of girl. Yeah.
We know that. But I was thinking about like, okay, what is all of this saying to me? And there was one part back to the dissertation where you say Nancy Cott perhaps most succinctly describes this tension in the sentimental language of women's friendships as the way in which what bound women together was also what often bound them down.
Yeah, I love that quote of Nancy's. It's one of those moments where it's like, I don't know that I can say anything close to this as good, so I might as well just take her words.
But it feels like that captures a lot of what's permeating through Westward Women. But I wanted to ask, like, I know you have the journal book, and we want to talk about your family's journals. Do you want to talk about this novel, Westward Women, through these books, or do you just want to start with telling me about those journals?
Yeah, I think it'd be because I don't want to, like, once I want to get into the books the books, so good. I'll just do a real quick.
Well, no, please. Yeah. I think this is important because I didn't know this backstory.
Yeah, so I was reading a lot of women's manuscripts from the 19th century for my PhD dissertation.
As one does.
And there's no shortage, like these are the kinds of things that exist in every single archive around the country, but nobody's reading them because they're not by famous people. They're like anonymous women who are just, we've kept them because maybe they were married to a rich guy who had a lot to do with local government, or maybe we kept them because, especially for autograph albums, the books themselves are really beautifully bound. They don't really care what's in them, but they're like a testament to a certain era in bookbinding. So, all these things that just kind of ended up in archives, I don't want to say by mistake, but like offhand. And I was reading a ton of those. And, like you said, primary source research is so interesting because it feels like discovery and it feels intimate. Like you are all of a sudden included in that intimate address in a way that is hard to just let go of, even though what they're saying isn't all that different, or all that quote unquote extraordinary or scandalous, Sometimes it is. Our mutual friend and also excellent writer, Jeremy Jones, has a family archive of quite scandalous manuscripts. But even when they're not scandalous, I think you are finding things that are incredible about what these women who have disappeared into our cultural records, what they want and what they yearn for, and the kinds of constraints they keep coming up against. And so I was reading these things and I was like, we have a lot of these in my family's basement too. And so some of these things my various family members sent me because they knew I was working on manuscript culture as a concept. And then some I sought out. There's a closet at home that just had a box full of stuff that my mom kept from a pretty wild road trip she took in the 1970s. And that included everything from like photographs to letters, a lot of letters, mostly letters, between her and her sister, who was also on a westward road trip, between her and her mother, of course, her mother being very concerned about what's happening to her, between her and a boyfriend who she eventually kind of met up with on the West trip. And I mean, all of these were so interesting to me because they were kind of the woman I knew. But of course, they weren't at all the woman that I knew. They weren't my mother. They were this woman who had her own desires and her own life that was totally separate from anything close to me. I wasn't even close to being in the picture at that point. And it was a world where there were extraordinary circumstances happening. Roe v. Wade was going on. Civil rights movement, was happening. It was also a time whenever there were a lot of serial killers kind of in the news cycle while my mom was traveling around. And so all of that, I think, culminated to this real kind of almost end of the world reckless feeling of, I just have to get out of here. She said that, I remember my mom, when I asked her about this trip, told me that her family didn't really come to her graduation from the University of Maryland, but they all came to see her sister off on her road trip. And so there's really something about like this desire to just get out, to go, to see the world and what it's going to offer you, as opposed to like sitting in a library and trying to figure it out. And so that felt like a story to me. And so the first
kind of getting chills thinking about like, whoa, that realization.
And reading the letters between them, knowing that backstory was so great because, they're very different people, but they had a rapport, and kind of figuring out the complexities of that relationship inspired me to try to come up with the same kinds of complexities, if not the same kinds of people, at least that level of complexity. And I will always be writing about complex relationships between women. So that was my way in. And then I just, I kind of took an oral history of it from my mom. I read as many of those documents as I could. I was reading other kind of crazy family archival documents, my grandmother's day book that she kept while she was dating, I don't know, something like 15 men after World War II, where she was a nurse and she was dating a lot of men, and writing about that. I was, reading about this crazy trip to the Alps that my great aunt had taken by some fluke because her family is like coal mining country, 10 kids. And, she found her way on this trip. And all of that, even though it was different contexts, really started to cohere to me around these feelings of desire and trying to find ways of exerting that desire through like travel as a form of autonomy, And so I wrote a novel that was very different from this one, actually, where it was basically just Amy on a road trip. And that novel just wasn't working for me. I couldn't get the plot to work. Part of it is I'm a speculative writer at heart. I love making things weird.
Yeah.
I want it to be the real world, but then I just want to make it a little weirder, like a Karen Russell weirder.
Oh yeah, that's a great.
Love Karen Russell.
Anybody who can get close to Karen Russell is one of the best writers of all time. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I kind of finally just let myself get weirder with it. I realized I broke it up into about 1,000 different voices that ended up becoming like, I guess, 3 and then some other random interstitials, like the one that I just read. And I think the chorus of women was the only way I could get it to work. So that's how it became what it is.
So that's, oh my gosh, that is fascinating. And I love that it came from real voices. Because, that's the thing that I love about the story is like, this is how women have felt forever in just different contexts, Some have had more freedom than others, depending when they were born and where. But I also want to touch on another thing about like regular women versus famous women. And what's interesting of being in the lives of like these normal people is what is it? The Dickinson
problem. Yeah, also from my dissertation, but that was Alex Socarides' brilliant formulation.
Right, but this is like it's all coming together with the idea that like we tend to think of stories as important if they're dealing with this one big person, and because of Emily Dickinson, we've used her as a stand-in for all these other poets of the time that we don't even know, because like she's just what they were. She you can just read Emily and you would get it. And it's like, that's crazy. She's just one of many. And so the idea that there's a chorus of women in this story, and some of it's in real life, that these women are together and they're bound together and they're helping each other. But then with the weird shit that happens, it's like, then it's actually like becomes a dream. Like the chorus of women is now not even real, but totally real. It's like interesting how much that like the voices of all of these different women and their different experiences that are mostly unknown are like helping figure out the story, move it along, and like, yeah.
Yeah, and when I say this on a podcast, it's going to sound so weird because if they haven't read the book, but yeah, I mean those voices are kind of, it's like as these women are moving through spaces where other women have been, it's almost like through scent or fragments of them that are left in this space, they can pick these things up, and that kind of vestige of women is what manuscript culture feels like to me. Like when you pick up an autograph album and a flower petal falls out that someone hasn't cracked it open in years, or like when you open a letter from an envelope that hasn't been opened in years and you smell, the perfume on the envelope and you're just like, oh my God, they're still here. And so I wasn't going to actually say that one of the characters kept finding letters, but I felt like the voices to me became those kinds of whispers that you can get from manuscripts too.
I mean, it is wild actually, like thinking back how much smell plays into the story. When Amy finally gets on the bus and replaces, I don't know how much I want to give away. Because it's like the context, it's like no one would know.
Right.
But it's like you said, like a smell is a stain.
Yeah.
And it's something that lingers. But lemons. I think of lemons when I think of Westward Women.
Yeah.
Like in Lemonade. It's like there's just so many things that are in the story where it's people are reminded of these people they love because of sense. And I think like that gives it a really tangible, because I think all of us can relate to that.
Yeah. I think I remember in elementary school being told that the way you do well on a test is that you learn the answers while being associated with a smell. So if you smell an orange while you're learning the answer
Weird.
to a history question, that then whenever you're taking the history test, you pull out an orange and you smell it and it'll help you remember, because memory is tied so closely to scent. And something about that really stuck with me. And now, yeah, I think you're right. When I write, I write in scents.
Well, yeah, because then it's like, you're picking up on a scent. And especially in the case of Amy, it's like, she is dreaming memories. Like this, right. I mean, it's a trippy book. Like
weird.
But I'm curious, like going from these just letters that you wrote or read that other people wrote to writing that first draft to then having someone dream memories of other people they don't know. When did you decide to insert those elements of strangeness?
Yeah, this is going to get really honest about process, but
I mean, because it made the book like so much better. I mean, I love how weird this got.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad. Those interstitials that are now the voices, those are actually always part of the book, but they weren't always voices. For a long time, they were just between sections of Amy's story. There would be these inserted vignettes of other women traveling west, and they weren't absolutely connected in the same way. And at a certain point, I was like, this story must have a plot. And if this story is going to have a plot, I mean, it helps to make it yeah, this is what happens when literary writers try to publish something. They're like, oh, right, plot. And plot is hard, like I think we really underestimate how hard plot is. And so what always helps me externalize the internal and the kind of intellectual stuff that I'm doing is that weird stuff, is the speculative stuff. And so for me, it kind of became the link to what I wanted to say. I wanted to say it in this disembodied way. And instead, I needed to ground it in a plot. And the infection helped me do that. It gave me a reason why Amy would be experiencing these voices. It gave me a reason to talk about all of these women as a movement going west. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. It could be caused by an infection. And, when my mom would talk about these times, to me, the desire to go west did feel contagious. It was socially contagious. It was that experience that comes up in the book of a girl telling you about how she was going west, and you all of a sudden would catch the itch to do it in a figurative sense made literal. And that's what I like about when things get weird in speculative fiction, is that, it might seem weird at first, but then you realize that it's a kind of truth made physical.
Yeah, because I mean, even there's a group of 5 that decide to go west together. And it's different than, I think, like peer pressure. It's like something that everybody's feeling underneath, and you just need some people to act on it. And then it becomes like more than an idea, it's now a possibility. And I think I could not, I didn't know when I first read it, the first dream memory that Amy had. I was like, what on earth is happening now? But then as I went, I was like, damn, this is a good move. Like, this is a really good move. Because now I was looking forward to the next one and what it was going to connect to. So I can get you with the plot, because like, you're a beautiful writer. There are so many sentences that I love reading, and that alone will keep me with the book. And to be honest, sometimes even if the plot isn't good, I don't.
Yeah,
I still love it.
That's because you're a really good reader. Yeah.
But like, perhaps there's a group of science fiction-y readers or speculative readers that might think they're going to get more about the infection. And I'm like, well, this book isn't the one for you, right?
Right.
Like in terms of the medical, but I'm like, why do we need the medical background of it? That's boring, I just need to know that this insane migration is happening because of this infection. And I just want that to like take off the story. So I think that's why this book was meant for me, is because I didn't want to dwell on any of like the, like why, and you talk, because there's one of the moms works as a nurse. They're talking about like how to treat this. And I think the other interesting thing was the commentary about men talking about the women on the television.
Yeah.
And like even one posing to arrest them.
As if we don't know what it's like to hear men on the radio or the TV talking about women's bodies, you know? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there was that, because it was, I think, in the same scene, or at least when they were in the shelter in Denver, Eve and Ginny, right? They were watching these things on the television of men talking about their bodies and how they should be controlled so they don't infect anybody else. But then you slid in this interesting remark by one of the volunteers that I thought was like a really important line, and it seemed subtle, but it absolutely was not. I don't remember exactly what it was.
We all feel the itch.
We all feel the itch. Some of us just learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that seems kind of like a big part of this. There's two sides of looking at this. It's like, you know, you're acting on the itch, you're going west, but like, isn't this just what people feel all the time? So like, I'm curious if that was something with like in the letters or other research you were doing that you maybe recognized this difference of staying and leaving and like what was more responsible or selfish or.
Yeah. You know what I used to tell myself this was a book about, because at the beginning when I first started really early on, I was like, okay, it's going to be two girls, and one has always been perceived as the one who stays, and the other one has always been perceived as the one who's going to go, when in actuality they're going to flip over the course of the novel. The Amy is going to become the Ginny, and the Ginny is going to become the Amy, which actually does happen in the novel now too, but it became so much more than that. But that idea, the stereotype of the girl who stays versus like the homebody versus the wild child, you know, that to me was in the letters, that feeling of the person who's going to take care of mom and dad, the person who's reliable, the person who's predictable, and the person who is gonna pick up with their partner in a refurbished van and get the hell out, you know? And I knew from having, I think, feeling more often like the homebody that that even homebodies, it's not a binary like that, right? Like even the homebodies feel the itch or want to do the other thing. And even the people, the wild child, right? Sometimes they feel like they need a tether. And so I wanted to kind of push against that binary, but that was what was in the letter. Yeah. I think where that came from. Yeah. When I was reading.
Because I was curious too, thinking about like where you fell on this when you were growing up. How do you pronounce the name of your hometown?
Pofftown, P-F-A-F-F.
Thank God I didn't try that. I knew, because North Carolina has the weirdest pronunciations of names, so I'm just like, I'm not even going to try.
Yeah, Pofftown.
But you know, that's like what, a few thousand people outside of Winston?
Winston-Salem. Yeah. I think it was annexed. Well, I know for a fact it was annexed by Winston-Salem while I was growing up, because my brother made a bunch of Save Pofftown shirts to distribute amongst our community. So yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Was this the place? Like, could you feel this itch?
Yeah, I mean, even you could kind of see some of the light pollution around Winston-Salem whenever you went to bed in Pofftown. You could see the stars in Pofftown, but you could also see the light pollution coming from Winston-Salem. And so, I mean, Winston-Salem at that point, now it's become so much, you know, it's incredible what they've done. But when I was growing up there, it was a really kind of burnt out post-tobacco town. That energy that nothing was going on downtown was palpable when you were in Winston, but when you were outside of Winston looking at it, you're like, that's where things are happening. Ooh. And where I am, nothing is happening. I mean, the only things I could walk to were like a shooting range, you know? And so it's funny how you can feel the desire for the thing that's in the distance, even when you go to the thing in the distance, you know, there's nothing really there going on there either. And I was joking, like I always want to live in Western North Carolina. I mean, I would look towards the mountains and think Asheville, you know, there's stuff happening there and not where I am. I absolutely felt that way. And I think, again, even people who might be considered the wild child or the person who would go out and do those things or the risk taker, you know, I think those people feel that too, you know, like I don't know that it's that they cure their itch by doing it. And
that also seems to be the theme of like, I mean, Eve. But not Eve. Right. I related so much to her character because she kept getting annoyed at every single thing about home.
Yeah.
Early on in the story, it's like, what is this deal with people worrying about home? Like, we're home, you know, whatever the decor was. And yeah, it just kind of like was one of those things where I understand that because I don't have one. And I cannot stand, because I'm like, I've just made them in a million different ways.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think if this is getting too personal, but you know, I I grew up in Pofftown, but my parents, as the novel makes clear, grew up in Pennsylvania. My mom grew up in Gibsonia outside of Pittsburgh, and then did go on this road trip. And then my parents, they were in Florida for like 10 years, and then they ended up in North Carolina because of a grad program and stayed. So it's not, I have never felt, especially when you grow up somewhere like Winston-Salem or near Winston-Salem, where there's a lot of people who've been there for a very long time. There's some old money neighborhoods, there's a feeling like you're from here or you're not. And I never was. And so there's something, I didn't realize this until after I'd done it, but this novel and another novel I've written, they're both road trip novels. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I like psychoanalyzed myself. And I was like, oh, right, of course they're road trip novels because, you write how you feel, what your community is. And I've always, I've made, my husband and I lived in Brooklyn for about a decade, and that was our home. We made it our home. That was my community. Here already, everybody has been so wonderful. It feels like home, but there'll always be that part of myself that feels untethered and that is a little resentful of the idea that you have to be from somewhere to have substance to write about or to be about. Like,
yeah, it full-blown pisses me off because I could never.
Yeah.
Like some of these people that write about, and I love these stories, like Anne Pancake's Strange as This Weather Has Been.
Me too. No, me
I'll
too.
I'll never
yeah.
be so connected to a land as she is to West Virginia.
Right.
And I still love that story, partly because I long for it, but mostly just because like I find that the opposite view of what I have.
Right.
So it's like interesting to learn about someone's experience who has that deep of a connection to the land. I'd say I have a very deep connection to these mountains, but it's not epigenetic. Like it's not 8 generations deep on the Pancake Farm in Hampshire County, West Virginia. Like that's not what it is. My dad was in the military. My mom and he moved from Michigan with my mom to California, to Germany, to Texas, to Roanoke, to Maryland. We grew up mostly in Ohio, but partly in Nebraska. Then they moved to Pittsburgh. Yeah. And now they're in Southern California again. All of my friends had 18 years in the same childhood home, for the most part. Yeah. I never lived in the same, this is the longest I've lived anywhere since I was 16.
But that's an experience too.
It totally is, and it's valid. And you should be able to write about that.
and I think, again, even people who have lived in the same place can feel like those feelings of outsiderness or can have those feelings of wanting difference, And so, but I just think it's valuable to write from that perspective too, from the perspective of being in a community that you feel like you can't fully call your own or being scared that there isn't one until you make those relationships yourself. Like it takes work to do that, and those relationships matter.
This is where I try to hopefully bring some new energy into people's lives and like a different perspective because, I haven't been in Franklin all that long, but I work really hard to make Franklin a place people want to be. Just in general, be part of the community. I don't have to have lived there. And at the same time, sometimes I'm at home at night and I'm like, damn, if I died literally right now in Franklin, North Carolina, it's like that would be the most meaningless death. Like no one would even know for like quite some time. You know what I mean? But it's like, what a strange place to die. Like I have friends who want to be buried in the same dirt as their parents. That is unfathomable to me because like they go generations deep in Macomb, Mississippi or whatever.
I was going to say, I don't even know where that would be for me.
Right. But like, I joke about that, but it's like you can make yourself lonely in my situation by thinking about just how little attachment I do have to this place. There's always the flip side to these things. And I also think my attachment is no less valid just because it's less long.
And I was just going to say, it's so funny you say that because, Matt, I think of you as someone who has so much attachment because of the relationships that you build. And I guess that's what I mean about, whenever you're somebody who doesn't have like a presupposed claim to a place, building those relationships becomes so important, and that becomes community, not to be too cheesy about it, but that's really how it felt in Brooklyn. We made those ties and then it became home. And I think one of the reasons this story and the other stories with road trips end up becoming maybe a theme for me is that I think road trips are so intimate. When you're in the car with somebody, it's so intimate. And place matters in this story in the way that I think place matters in any story anyone writes, and that you shouldn't write from it about a place disingenuously. But I think that the relationships matter too. The relationships kind of make the place. And so I find myself finding tethers that way if I can't find it to the place independently.
Yeah, and I think that comes out in the story through the relationships with these young women because I loved how you take these people who are strangers and yet they care for each other. And they're there to help them, especially when they can't help themselves with the infection. The meeting of all of these relationships at one point, you start to realize, like, yeah, this is kind of a confusing group of people. But I think those are what makes, like, that's what makes the best relationships. It's like, why are these people even standing here together on this road right now?
And yet it's perfect that they are.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's about giving, what you have to the people that you're with and making those choices to be a good friend, be a good community member, to be helpful, to listen to people, all of these things. And it has nothing to do with, did you grow up in Gibsonia or not?
I mean, a different meaning to what binds them together binds them down, right?
Yeah. It really all goes back to that.
Yeah.
But I found Eve's story particularly relatable of all of them because of that nagging question of home. And I think a lot of people will find comfort in one or more of these characters, because they're saying things and thinking things and feeling things that a lot of people do that, especially with the home question of like, do I jet out or do I stay? I mean, it's an eternal question. Sometimes I think like, I'll just move in a couple of years again, whatever. And then other times I'm like, man, I'd like to die in this house. Yeah. It's just an eternal thing. It's going to be really hard to make that call, and you just got to go with what you believe is the right thing in the moment. But I also do want to get to, you told me something interesting about your family in Pennsylvania, because there's more than I realized of your family in this story. Not only the Gibsonia connection with family, but then museum culture, which is a very important part of this novel.
Yeah.
Because it's the one of the fathers in this story works at a museum. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of these scenes where, the symbolism of what he does is coming into play with these young women's lives. But can you talk about the few people that are really prominent in these characters from your family, especially with the museum angle?
Yeah, I mean, so my maternal grandfather was an entomologist at the Carnegie Museum, and I do want to be clear, just in case it starts feeling autobiographical, that the man who is the grandfather is not at all like my paternal grandfather was. Just like the woman who is Amy's mother is not very much like my maternal grandmother, except that my maternal grandmother was a nurse. And so I found these professions interesting because, as one of the characters articulates in the novel at a certain point, like they seem like flip sides of maybe the same thing, which is like a nurse trying to care for a living body, and the museum figure, especially one who's working with insects, trying to work with the dead remains, but still taking care, And I actually think museum life is a really good example of what we were just talking about. People who work in museums often are from all over. I mean, they're intellectuals, they're academics, but then they find a community that is very particular within the museum itself. And, when I love talking to my mom and my aunt about this, because it's like, they knew all the museum folks that their father worked with, and they all have these great idiosyncrasies, but they were also so kind, and it mattered to them that they supported each other and that they were there for each other. And I think that is, maybe increasingly uncool in its incredible sincerity, but I think these are people who didn't really care about being cool either. They loved their little niche in the world, and they loved being in it together. And so they found a kind of home in a liminal space.
I love that, because it's like whatever the reason a group of people come together is reason enough. And it might be working at a museum. It might be helping people with this infection and their westward migration, but whatever. And that's why I feel in the literary community. It's like City Lights is this place where all of these different kinds of people can come together because of a shared love of story.
Right.
And there's not any particular type of person that comes into the store. It's all of them. But there's a reason we're all there. And that's what makes it beautiful. And
your podcast is a road trip.
It
is finding community in liminal spaces. Yeah. It's building community on the road. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's my attempt to show that just because you don't belong in one place doesn't mean you don't belong.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, obviously I want to have good conversations about these books, but I just felt like it was important to talk about all these elements of your novel because I don't know what it's going to do in the world, but it's really important and special to me. This book deserves to be read and shared, and I just feel like a lot of people are going to love it. I really do.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you very much.
So speaking of these journals, do you want to start with this journal book, or was there another one you wanted to go to first?
I think it's hard to segue from that in any more of a perfect way than to talk about this first book for Books on the Bed. Yeah. Some of these get farther afield. So I think
let's do it.
We got to start with this one. So my first book is The Extraordinary Work of Ordinary Writing by Jennifer Seinor. Have you heard of this book?
I have not, but it looks awesome.
So this book is it's one of those fun books that's like 3 different things at once. I keep calling it a book because I'm not really sure what genre to call it. I mean, I read it as part of my PhD program. So on one hand, it's literary criticism, sort of. But the literature, quote unquote, that she is reading is ordinary women's manuscript materials, specifically her, I don't remember how many great aunt.
One of them great ones.
Who was a homesteader in the Dakotas.
I am a sucker for the Dakotas.
At the end of the 19th century. And this is talk about trying to make home where you can get it, right? So it's not literature in the traditional sense. And actually, Seinor's like whole argument here is that we shouldn't read these things as literature because then we expect them to do a lot of things they're not doing. That letters and journals and all of these other, forgotten or kind of overlooked pieces of writing that women primarily do. That's the other thing, right? Like a lot of what women throughout history have written are things like shopping lists and annotated kitchen calendars and these things that we think of as detritus because they're not quote unquote literary. And so, the stories that they're telling don't have the same kinds of arcs or cathartic endings. I mean, they are daily life. That's not quote unquote as exciting. And yet it's incredibly essential. She's trying to help us see how we can still read these things, even if it's a different type of reading than we're used to. So in that way, it's literary criticism, but it's also this kind of biography, I suppose, of her great aunt and this moment in history at the turn of the century. And then it's also a memoir. Jennifer Seinor's like weaving in her own life in here too. And, because I'm a sucker for this stuff, it has this kind of thing. I know people can't see, but it's got these great reproduced images of the manuscripts themselves, which I love because then you feel like you're part of it. Again, that intimacy. It has the diary entries themselves from her great aunt's diary, but it also has some really beautiful writing where she's relating that to herself and to other things. So I think it's a mind-blowing book, not only because it's a great work of narrative nonfiction, but because of what it's asking us to do. It's inviting all of us to go into our mother's basements, and see what's there and value what's there and she has this great line, that in determining the values of a society, you only need to investigate what gets discarded, and that these are the things that we discard, and so,
That's a good line.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
I like that, the detritus.
Yeah.
The things that are discarded, thrown to a dark corner that you'll never look at. I think the cool people in life tend to do something with that. I've realized, like, there's a theme in my reading of appreciating someone who's willing to say, I wonder what all this stuff is. And, a seminal book for my life that influenced everything I do is by Tara Hunter. I've talked about it since the jump. To Joy My Freedom is an incredible history book about Black women, domestic workers in Reconstruction, United States, because ain't nobody asked what they were doing when they got free. Mm. And so it's this whole new world that opened up to me. It's like, I never once considered what the normal life of a Black woman was when they were freed from slavery, because they had even less opportunity, and even less outlets to write, make literature, whatever, right? But so, like, what are these what can we say about these people's lives if they don't have this platform?
And, like, what forms of writing happen whenever you're not famous, to go back to that earlier, you know, I mean, it's not that people don't write or don't have interesting things to say. They're just doing it differently. And so we need to learn how to appreciate that as opposed to believing that they should fit the mold of what we think is a valuable form of writing. Valuable, and I mean that in high quotations in terms of market value too. But yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of essential questions to this now, like with online culture, you know, Substack and Big Five publishing or indie publishing or self-publishing. And I was like, what's legitimate? And I'm like, I don't think you could possibly say what's legitimate based on, look, George Saunders has like the #1 Substack.
Yeah.
That's because he's already famous.
Right.
Right. But like, there's some other stuff that I've read that is just like mind-blowingly good.
Yeah.
It has like 38 subscribers.
It exists in mass, and that's part of the problem of both that and manuscripts, right? Is that like hierarchizing that is how we get through the masses, but by hierarchizing it, you also you miss so much of what makes it up, you know? And so I love this book because it honors that, and it reminds all of us, it gives us, I think, tools for all of us to try to honor it. It seems
like that's the point, is like, how do you appreciate these things and how do you read differently?
Right.
So that you can investigate them. Because I think that's what a lot of people are like, well, what do I make of this?
Right. I don't want to throw out my great-great-grandmother's diary. This is probably quote unquote important, but what am I doing with it? You know, it's so, another quote from this is like, it's the things that we don't read because it's so commonplace as to be boring, right? That we assume it's boring because it's ordinary. And so we don't read it. But somehow it gets kept, you know, it's like not quite thrown out. That's the thing about detritus. It's not totally gotten rid of, but it's just kind of down there at the bottom with all the grit and the shit, you know, and this is trying to see it differently. So I love this book for very personal reasons, but also for very kind of intellectual ones.
And I think it fits the theme of what even is a book.
Yes,
like that's
right.
A lot of people have talked about this, is the books that have meant the most to them are 3 things in one. And I'm just like so curious about this angle with the Dakotas and learning about that. So
yeah, because of course the story itself is interesting too, right? Yeah.
I mean, you struck a chord, because there's nothing better than like a good old frontier. It doesn't even need to be like a glorious, exciting story. I just want to know what life was like.
Right, because it was not glorious and exciting, right? Like the entry I just randomly flipped to was washed and made bread. It's like, yep, that sounds like a whole day's work, you know?
I'm about to read this book called Homestead. Have you heard of this?
No.
Melissa Moustakis.
Okay, no, I haven't.
Okay, it's about this couple who's like, you know, starting their life together in a homestead in Alaska. And I'm pretty sure it's based on Melissa's family story, partly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like, there's just something about that where it's not about like, oh man, it's like huge bear attack or anything. It's like, nope, these are people trying to build a life in a remote place. What's that like?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's, you know, I'm always fascinated by that.
Yeah.
No, that's a beautiful book to start. Is there any other thing you want to read from it?
I can read part of it. There was there's this beginning that I think does a good job starting to mix this like literary criticism with personal memoir stuff. So she goes to her great aunt in the hospital to talk to her about, did you ever keep a diary? And basically she says, oh yeah, but then I burned them all. And which I'm sure Jennifer Steiner like died a little inside. And then she wrote this. If her diary had not been burned, had it escaped the flames, it would rest between my own diary and the diary that forms the center of this study of ordinary writing, the diary of Annie Ray, Billy's great-aunt, and my great-great-great-aunt. However, Billy's diary did not make it into the hands of another generation. Not even valued enough to throw into an unmarked box at the Historical Society, like most things ordinary, it's long gone. The holes in the fabric of the past left by the burned and the discarded, in my own family as well as in the larger communities in which I claim membership, urge me to recover and revalue what others have been so quick to toss. Like stones across a river, we mark our days. In fact, we make our days by the stories we tell, the events we name as special, the moments we raise from the unmarked flow of, quote, in time in, end quote, to the privileged status of, quote, time when, end quote. In the meantime, slowly, quietly, urgently, the rush of the ordinary surges past these mossy-edged tales. It is into this river that I wade. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Just love how it meshes, like her diary with this non-existent diary, or the diary that did exist, right? And with the diary that she is now, quote unquote, studying. It's just a good encapsulation of how it's a book that I'm not sure I can define, but it's worth reading. Yeah.
That's a heck of a start. Dang, I need that. I'm going to order it.
I was going to say, you can take this one for
sold me.
A while. Yeah.
Well, gladly. That was a perfect place to start. What about number 2?
Yeah, number 2, I'll try to find ways to transition amongst these, although I got to tell you, eventually the transitions don't work.
I would not worry about that.
Yeah, this next transition is easy, though, because despite the Dickinson problem, I have, in fact, brought some Dickinson to feed my little 19th century soul.
I think you have to.
Yeah, I know. But it's, and this is going to sound blasphemous to fellow 19th century Dickinson scholars. I don't even love Dickinson because of her poetry. Which is going to be a tough thing. Like, some of her poems are beautiful. The Way I Read a Letter's This is a beautiful poem. Going to Him, A Happy Letter is one of my favorites. There are great ones. But what I love about Dickinson is something that Jennifer Steiner says, actually, too, which is that manuscripts direct us away from, what literature might be, and instead what the process of making it is. What writing is as a process, even when there's not some kind of finished, polished product that results from it. Because Dickinson, didn't publish a lot, and so a lot of her work is based in manuscripts. And what I love, the book that I'm holding right now is called Envelope Poems, which is actually a kind of spin-off of another edition called The Gorgeous Nothings, which is a collection of the images of Dickinson's scrap-based poetry, which she did later in life. And so it's also annotated with all my dissertation-y handwriting that no one can read. But it's images of, and this one is specifically all of the poems that she wrote on scraps of envelopes. The Gorgeous Nothings are kind of all the scraps. So sometimes it's like the corner of a box from her kitchen or something.
Wow.
And what I love about this is its writing happens in the scraps of time we give it, especially women's writing. And I'm feeling this more and more since giving birth, but it's just like, oh, I have a second while my baby is napping. Let's try to write as much as possible, Or so much of Westward Women was written on New Jersey Transit when I was commuting to teach, and you just find the scraps of time that you can. That is actually what the life of a writer is. It isn't some genius going into a room by himself and closing the door and spilling it all out. So I love that she celebrates that kind of process. So it's a little bit of a cheat because I'm saying I love it for its form rather than its content. But
not at all.
Yeah.
I'm actually sometimes surprised that people don't take more liberties with how they talk about a book. Andrea L. Rogers had a book that it was basically just because it reminds her of her mom. It's this book of poems that her mom read to her and makes her think of the cigarette smoke and a certain place in their house and time of day and everything. It's
does that book smell like cigarette smoke? You're in with sense again, yeah.
But it's it's almost, sometimes it's but I know what you're saying, because I'm particularly fascinated with just Dickinson as a person. Mm-hmm. Similar to Willa Cather. I do love Cather's writing.
Cather's archive is also fabulous too, if you're talking about manuscripts.
Yeah. And there's a great biography, Chasing Bright Medusas, that finally includes Cather's letters that, to all these other people. But it's the richness of her life, I think, makes me appreciate the novels, her novellas even more. And with Emily Dickinson, it's she can be a stand-in and that could be bad. But I also think she's a really interesting person to learn about. And I love the show Dickinson so much.
I just taught a Dickinson poem and I used a scene from that to help them through it.
It is one of the best shows I've ever watched in my life. Apple TV, unfortunately, doesn't get enough love for anything that they put out. But I just love how it shows Emily Dickinson living.
Yeah, because she did live.
As opposed to, these are her poems. Here are what a bunch of men said about what she was like. That show was intentional about showing her making a cake for the annual, bake-off in Amherst and all of these other ways that she was participating.
Yes.
That poetry can't just come from sitting by a fireplace, But that show really made me actually more interested in her as a person because I didn't know much more than, kind of the basics.
Yeah. And, she can be, we were talking about the Dickinson trap. She can be kind of treated as a stand-in that obscures all of these other women. But it's not because Dickinson is trying to do that, right? Like Dickinson, I feel like, is actually trying to, not that she was trying to do anything. She's not speaking to us.
Right.
She was speaking to her intimate community. And I think that she really valued intimate community and didn't really care as much if like a person across the country was reading this. She wanted to do it because of the process of writing and how it mattered to the people around her. And I think she was an ordinary, everyday writer, actually, who was extraordinary because those two things aren't binaries either. And so that's what I love about these scrap poems in particular is that I can just flip through this. Gorgeous Nothings is a bigger tome. So the nice thing about this is that you can just kind of take it with you. But I love that you can just flip to this and kind of be reminded of the everydayness that writing can take up in your life and that, that beauty happens in those everyday, fragmented, tiny things. We look for big moments of beauty or cataclysmic joy, and that's not where it happens. It happens in the crevices. And
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And I like the point about women and when they have to write or how they have to find time to write. There was a good article recently about the problem with like the perfect writing desk.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that.
I read this actually. Who was it? My brother or my father or my mom? Someone in my family sent me this. I'm pretty sure it was my brother. And it was great.
It
was definitely my brother. Yeah. Jacob, if you're listening to this because you do everything for me, you sent me a great article on this.
But it's like, I think this is a beautiful book to capture. I also love how like thematically things start to tie in together when these interviews happen. You definitely have a keen interest in the everyday and the archives of the everyday, in that it's not a perfect piece of paper that was written on a computer. It's something that looks torn and just random.
Yeah, and we'll get different, but I think that there's been a strong theme so far. And the only poem I'll read from this one is or if you can even call them poems, that is also the question. The only fragment I'll read from Dickinson today is the one that actually gave its name to the Gorgeous Nothings larger collection. So, clogged only with music, like the wheels of birds, their high appointment of afternoon and the lives and the gorgeous nothings which compose the sunsets. And I'm going to admit, because I know you're going to helpfully cut this for me, that I just struggled to read this because I'm reading it off of a facsimile of a scrap of an envelope. And so, the effort that it takes to read it in and of itself is kind of part of the experience. It is maybe not a book that rewards reading aloud. So I encourage people to actually experience it.
Feel it, look at it. Yes. That's great. I love it. Is Randall going to be number 3?
Randall's going to be number 3.
I knew. I just had a feeling that Randall would be a part of this.
Are you serious? Why? Yeah, I'm curious why you knew or how you knew.
Based on where you went to school.
Yeah.
And the type of reader you are, it just felt like someone that would mean enough to you to be part of this stack of 6.
Yeah, Randall was my teacher at Carolina.
So pretty freaking sweet.
Yeah, pretty freaking sweet.
To be a student of Randall Keenan. That's crazy.
Yeah. And he, it's one of those things. He's an incredible writer. And I kind of don't feel like that really people came to terms with that until after he died very suddenly in 2020.
Interesting.
People around here certainly did, people, North Carolina, but the broader literary world didn't until his death, which is also kind of horribly when this collection that I'm holding, If I Had Two Wings, was published by Norton. And so it was recognized by the National Book Association right after he died. And it just feels like one of those things where you have to die before people acknowledge you. But I guess that's a theme of what I've already talked about. Yeah.
They didn't get their just due until they were gone. But I'm surprised no one's picked Randall Keenan yet.
No one's picked Randall Keenan yet.
No.
Well, then I'm so honored to be the first.
Very glad that you did. So let's talk about this book and Randall Keenan.
Yeah. I picked this one, I guess, mostly because it felt like the capstone on his life, although, it doesn't mean that people shouldn't seek out the other ones. He is someone who taught me what it means to write about the grounded in an ungrounded way. So I was just saying, I want my books to feel grounded. I want them to feel real. I want the people to feel real. I want the world to feel real, but I want it to be weird. Yeah. And Keenan always supported that very nicely in my writing in a way that is hard when you're a young writer, because I think when you're a young writer, I took his class when I was probably 19. I don't know. Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy.
And of course I had no idea who I was, taking a class with. And I think that when you're 19 and you're writing, these professors have read a lot of people's work. I don't want to say they come to it jaded because they're open-hearted people who really care, but I've had teachers who've given me lists of things I was not allowed to quote write about because they were things that they'd seen so much and they just couldn't stand to see it anymore. No car accidents, no dead dogs, et cetera, et cetera. And Keenan wasn't like that, I keep calling him Keenan because I feel like that's what we called him when I was 18, 19. Randall was not like that. He also, though, was, he wasn't going to like everything. And I think that's important to say, too, about creative writing professors, because you don't want the one who doesn't want to read anything, but you also don't want the one who's going to say everything was great. Yeah. He would say largely nothing if he didn't think it was great. He wasn't going to insult you, but he wasn't going to say an awful lot. And so when he got jazzed in a workshop, then you knew you had something, even if he was giving you criticism, because that meant he was talking. Yeah. I remember once I went to his office after I'd submitted this story about, actually, interestingly, because you told me about that book you just read, it was about a young girl who was realizing that her feelings for her friend, another girl, were slightly different than what maybe they should have been, and they were at a sleepover in this cabin. And anyway, in the midst of this, whenever she's kind of been rejected, ultimately she runs into a coyote because I'm weird, because I write weird stuff. I don't know. I can't help it. And I turned this story in for workshop, and Randall was like, you need to come see me in my office about this story. And if you have a professor who says that, you're like, oh shit, I've fucked up, I've really messed it up. So I went and I saw him, and he went on this whole excited speech about what coyotes mean in literature and being the trickster figure. And he goes, but you knew all of that, right? And I was like, no. I was like, there was some alert the other day that said that, and near Hanging Rock, there were some coyotes, and I just thought I'd put them in the thing. And he goes, Alice, here's your first lesson. If someone tells you that's what you intended, right? You say, yes. You say, I knew all of that. That is 100% what I meant to do. And I think I thought about that every day in my PhD program, that when someone said, did you mean to imply that? I'd say, yes. Yeah. Totally.
That's why it's so good. I thought about it beforehand. Knew exactly what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing all the time. That's so funny.
So, yeah.
I was just thinking about coyotes, so that's why I put it in there.
But that's the thing. If you're a weird writer, if you're a writer who writes things that are a little strange, people are going to bring things to the table with that. And I think that's the magic of it. And I think, you can have your intention, and you can also let it be a book in the world. And I think the weirdness invites those kinds of different interpretations. It's people trying to make sense of nonsense. And he encouraged me to do that. So
what a cool moment and just experience to have a teacher like that, and to have those things to look back on. It's like your journey of writing. It's only going to get more in memory, but those memories will always be something you look at as that was the beginning, and how lucky.
Yeah, and you don't appreciate them like that at the time.
No
Again,
way.
he was a professor I was hoping to get an A. And
but now,
but right, and even a year later after that, I was like, wait a minute, that was really important, and so I really, reading these is really kind of magical, because they are magical. These stories are, and they are that all these stories in this particular collection, and kind of in a lot of his writing, take place in technically what is fictional, a town, Timms Creek, North Carolina, although it's clearly very based in reality. They are stories about people who feel alienated from community, sometimes living in community. They are stories that are grounded, but that have very strange and ungrounded ways of finding those really real feelings. There are also stories about food, which I always associate with Randall too. He would always take his classes to Mama Dip's kitchen in Chapel Hill as the capstone. What? And Mama Dip's was incredible. So sad. It's permanently closed now, as is everything good in Chapel Hill.
Sad.
And there's a passage in this, it's not even the passage I was going to read, but where the character says, where is it? In my dream, I arose and walked to the kitchen, and there on the butcher's block was the sumptuous spread, glistening and steaming foods from my North Carolina boyhood, undreamt of on the Upper West Side: chitlins, pig feet, sweetbreads, chicken feet, gizzards, and livers, and head cheese. There were sweet potatoes and tomatoes and collard greens and okra and squash and, yes, sweet corn. And I was just like, so that's everything we ate at Mama Dip's together,
That's incredible.
He's a food guy.
Yeah. And you have to be, like, when you eat that growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding.
I don't know if you can be a food person growing up in, like, Nebraska,
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe. You can become a food person.
Yeah. But there's certain places that, like, food just feels like it's essential.
Yes.
In ways that it doesn't in other places. But yeah, that's so cool. You said there was another thing you wanted to read. Because I wanted to bring people into this collection of, highlighting some of what you're talking about with the way these stories are grounded and strange.
I'm going to read, this is a very strange opening, so I'm going to read the opening to my favorite story in the collection, which is Now I Come That Is. That squall, metallic and beastly squalling, coming from the bottom of hell itself. A squall full of suffering and pleas for mercy. A squall so familiar since Percy's earliest days, from when he was a little boy feeding his daddy Malcolm's Poland China brood sows. But he didn't want to hear it now, damn it. Not now. No, for now, Percy Tyrrell was deep inside a dream. He and Elvis were on the town. Was it Memphis? New Orleans? Nashville? He didn't really know, and it didn't really matter, because he was in this diner with the king after a wild night of drinking and pool. The velvet night as tangible as the sheets in which he tangled himself at this moment of the dream, at this moment when he and Elvis sat in the diner with the checkered white and red tablecloth with two blondes, one each, one for him and one for the king. And Percy had his hand on the milky red thigh of that big-legged gal who smiled through her smacking gum, and that leg was so soft and so inviting, and she smiled even bigger as Percy moved his hands up that thigh toward... But that squalling got louder as if someone were murdering that damn hog over and over, calling Percy back to wakefulness. And Percy didn't want to wake up, not with this big, fine-legged thing sitting next to him, practically begging for it, and Elvis looking on across the table through his sunglasses, his arm around his sweetie for the night. "What's your name again, hun?" "Evangeline," she said. "Evangeline, what a pretty name." "Yeah." Percy slid his hand a little higher. "Yeah, what's that smell?" At that moment, the moment when the dreamer begins to lose the threads and fabric of his dream, Percy began to dwell more and more on that vile, that powerful and obnoxious odor. Was it the woman? No, hadn't smelled her before. She looked clean enough. And the squalling kept on and on, the smell of the hog.
Gosh.
It's weird.
It's
so weird.
But it's so attractive.
Well, and I love how he'll mesh the thing that we're supposed to want with the grotesque. It's like that woman, even as he's describing his desire for her thick leg, I can't stop thinking of, bloody roasting hog meat. And it's so, and he, of course, is doing that very purposely. By the end, it's like her smell becomes its smell, and it's disgusting, but it's making us see something different about that sexual desire because of this hog that he cannot get out of his head. There's something about consumption there, too, I would say. It's a beautiful book that is often beautiful by being grotesque and odd. Yeah.
Which is, a hard thing to do. And I just love anything with strange dreams. I love...
that's another connect. I didn't even think about that with my book too, but strange.
Yeah, I love strange dreams. I love when people especially, and I hope strangers, always feel welcome to share strange dreams with me. If I meet them at a bonfire, I'd like to get directly to that.
Next time I have a weird dream, I'm going to text it to you. Yeah.
It's just something I enjoy learning about because people have some really fucking weird dreams, and I don't remember mine very often. So when people do vividly remember these things, I'm like, wow, You could do a whole book about these people's dreams, you know?
Yeah. And there's something in that opening too with the dreams and the velvet and the grit. Like it's very Lynchian actually, except that
yeah.
it is North Carolina, down home, sweaty Lynchian, which is like such a different vibe from Lynch.
I've never thought about that before, but that makes a lot of sense.
This is the kind of pitches that make book publishing salivate, where you're like, it's David Lynch, but sweaty down home Southern Lynch.
I hate that that's true. And it's both could be the worst pitch, but also
But also I'm into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm not going to stop thinking about that connection. And that pitch is like maybe the best one a publisher would ever hear. So, no, that's so good. I'm glad you honored Keenan.
Yeah, more people should honor Keenan on this show and elsewhere.
Yeah, because he was important, before he died.
Yeah.
It's good and it's important for us to keep these books alive and moving,
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine taking a class with a writer that good. That would intimidate the hell out of me. But maybe it's good you didn't know.
It's good I didn't know.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't know too. Okay.
All right. I'll use this as a segue since we were just talking about food and dreams and weirdness. I had to pick a Margaret Atwood book. I know it's who hasn't read Margaret Atwood at this point, but if I didn't pick a Margaret Atwood book, it would be disingenuous to me. And what I love about this podcast of yours, Matt, is that it is books that we, the authors, pick, but they are for you too. We're supposed to be putting them on your bed. And I know about you that you love an author's debut novel, that's special to you. And
it really is.
And Margaret Atwood, I mean, people have read Handmaid's Tale. I have a very special relationship with Cat's Eye, which is all about weird layered female friendships. I have Oryx and Crake over there on the table because that is the book that taught me that you can be weirder and it's okay. All that being said, you like debuts. So I have brought you Margaret Atwood's debut novel, The Edible Woman. I was going to ask, have you read The Edible Woman? As with many debut novels, I don't always think it is the best work of their writing, but in some ways it is the purest encapsulation of what another writing mentor of mine, Pam Durban, called their pre-assigned subject matter. Ooh. The thing that they had to write about, the thing that the more that they write, they're still writing about the same thing, but under a new guise.
I'm going to steal that.
Please. Well, I'll steal it from Pam. I stole it from Pam.
That's exactly how I feel. That's what it is. That's why I love debuts so much.
Yes. Well, then this will encapsulate that. Not a perfect novel, not her best written novel, but the purest encapsulation of her pre-assigned subject matter. Yeah.
So tell me about why you love this book. Maybe it's not the best, but what it is about this that you would love to share.
Yeah, so this is a novel about, just to give a quick overview, it's a novel about a woman who has always kind of played by the gendered rules of society. She's the kind of classic, I'm going to be a woman with a capital W. She's in a point in her life where she's about to get married to a man who has always played the role of the man in life. But she has many women friends who have kind of taken on different roles in the grand spectrum of womanhood. So her roommate is kind of the brash, grabs sexuality by the horns woman who is breaking some of those rules. She has an older childhood friend who is like pumping out babies. She often refers to the women at her office who she's clumped in with by default as the office virgins. So, she is trying to find where on this spectrum she is going to land. And as she's approaching her marriage to this, asshole, he's a jerk, she suddenly becomes very, very empathetic with food to the point that she can't eat it because it feels like a form of cannibalism. So very the vegetarian too, actually, but like in a different context. Uh-huh. So she keeps avoiding food as things in her life escalate without giving too much away. And she also works at a kind of corporate job doing market surveys. So there's certainly something about market consumption at the same time as there is about what society does to treat women like meat, and so Margaret Atwood has a complicated relationship with, especially in her early novels, calling her works feminist. I think, though, that this is a book that is really interested in the visceral experiences of being a woman and the way that those experiences can be violent even when they are not explicitly violent. There's no explicit violence in this, but there is a lot of eating that borders on violence.
Interesting.
I think the line that, this is not the passage that I'm reading, but the line that I might point out to illustrate that point is, she put a forkful, this is cake she's eating, a Valentine's Day cake. She put a forkful into her mouth and chewed it slowly. It felt spongy and cellular against her tongue, like the bursting of 1,000 tiny lungs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Sorry. But Margaret Atwood doesn't pull punches.
Yeah.
And so this is a novel that does not pull punches. Yeah.
I mean, why would you?
Yeah.
I think it's better when you don't.
So
I don't like novels that don't make me feel like that just did.
So it too is about consumption. It's about food, not unlike Randall Keenan's. It is about being weird and being comfortable with leaning into the strangeness. Not as strange as she ultimately goes. This is a little safer as a debut, but you can feel that thread in her still. And it is incredibly interested in female friendships, which is why I love it. Complicated female friendships that make women realize very discomforting and visceral things about themselves and the places that they are in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't believe I haven't read this, but now I'm definitely going to, because I love a debut. And I want to know if this is like I don't want to use that language. What's the best way to put it? It's like, maybe these are the concerns or the things that maybe she's not quite saying as much as she would like to say in a debut. Would you?
Yeah, and she's laying out the groundwork for so many things and can only kind of attack one of them here. I'm thinking about like how this is really also a book about corporate consumption and greed that it's not what the book ends up focusing on. The book, I think, ends up taking a slightly safer, might be kind of a rude word, but like the safer like zone of women treated like meat, and the corporate consumption aspect, she goes crazy with that in Oryx and Crake and that trilogy, the Mad Adam trilogy. And of course, she continues to consider the ways women are, treated with kind of subtle violences or not so subtle violences in other texts. But I think it's like a blueprint of these various interests that she can kind of start to touch on, but picks the one that is perhaps easiest to articulate.
Yeah. Did you say there was a passage that you picked out? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what the language is like in this.
Yeah. So this is a passage where the main character, Marion, is going, which is also kind of fitting because Marion was my maternal grandmother's name. So there's something in this that just like resonates. It's in that era too. So Marion is going to the hair salon. And basically she's hesitant to do so because she always feels like, quote, they treated your head like a cake, something to be carefully iced and ornamented. So this is her experience, just to make the food connection, once she is at the hair salon. The shampoo girl wore a pink smock and had sweaty armpits and strong professional hands. Marion had closed her eyes, leaning back against the operating table while her scalp was soaped and scraped and rinsed. She thought it would be a good idea if they would give anesthetics to the patients, just to put them to sleep while all these necessary physical details were taken care of. She didn't enjoy the feeling like being a slab of flesh. Then they had her strapped into the chair. Not really strapped in, but she couldn't get up and go running out into the winter street with wet hair and a surgical cloth around her neck. And the doctor had set to work. A young man in a white smock who smelled of cologne and had deft, spindly fingers and shoes with pointed toes. She had sat motionless, handing him the clamps, fascinated by the draped figure prisoned in the filigreed gold oval of the mirror and by the rack of gleaming instruments and bottled medicines on the counter in front of her. She couldn't see what he was doing behind her back. Her whole body felt curiously paralyzed. When at last all the clamps and rollers and clips and pins were in place and her head resembled a mutant hedgehog with a covering of rounded, hairy appendages instead of spikes, she was led away and installed under a dryer and switched on. She looked sideways down the assembly line of women seated in identical mauve chairs under identical whirring mushroom-shaped machines. All that was visible was a row of strange creatures with legs of various shapes and hands that held magazines and heads that were metal domes. Inert. Was this what she was being pushed towards? This compound of the simply vegetable and the simply mechanical? An electric mushroom.
Wow. Wow.
But there's like, that's what I'm saying. There's so much going on there. There's the corporate, there's the like industrial, right? But there's also food, the mushrooms, the vegetables. And then it's actually her getting her hair done, but being switched on and the like there's a lot happening there that I think is all Atwood, but it's all being compressed into this weird vacuum sealed package.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, damn. That was enticing. I love this.
Yeah.
And I love that you picked a debut. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, that was, I was like, how am I going to pick which Margaret Atwood to pick? And then I was like, oh, I got to give him the debut.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, because I will go to that. Because then also, too, it's like, I think it helps you understand a writer so much to know what those original concerns, topics, whatever you want to say. What was the pre-assigned?
Yeah, the pre-assigned subject matter, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's exciting to know that, even if you've read other books by an author. I mean, I tend to start with the debut so I can get that roadmap.
Yeah.
But if I haven't, it's kind of exciting to see where that roadmap led with the other books I read, you know?
Yeah. And I'll say, too, that this was a book that was really helpful to read when I was writing Westward Women, or to reread when I was writing Westward Women, because it is about, there's so many of these, the things that bind them together, bind them down elements.
Yeah.
But also it's a book that kind of taught me how to use point of view strategically. Westward Women has a lot of different point of views, and I don't just mean in terms of like different characters. I mean like one of them is in first person, one of them is in third person past tense, you know, like there's a second person interstitials. So this book starts in the first person, and as the character becomes more alienated from her body, moves into the third, and then by the end moves back into the first.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes feel like a cheap trick, the way authors are like telling you things through jarring perspective shifts, but it doesn't, I think, in this. Instead, it feels clever, certainly, but also like it pays off. And so, you know, I hope the same is true in that book, but it kind of gave me permission to be experimental with what I was doing with point of view.
I mean, you know, I think it worked.
Yeah.
I do want to ask, was this mentioned in your novel, this book?
It actually is. Yeah. At the very end, Amy ends up at, not to give anything away, I don't think it does. Amy ends up briefly at a house where a bunch of Westward women had kind of been using as a stayover. Yes. And one of the Westward women had left behind the edible woman. I knew
that it was in there. So I was like, oh, this makes some more sense now that it influenced the book in some way. Cool. I love it. What about number 5?
All right, number 5 is, I think, an easy pairing with Margaret Atwood because it's Mary Gateskill. Have you read Mary Gateskill before? Matt, you must. Mary Gateskill also is not afraid to write about unlikable women, but not because they're unlikable. She writes about unlikable women because nobody is really deep down 100% likable, and because women are complicit in the same systems that they are constrained by. So I picked this in part because I think Mary Gateskill's prose is wonderful, and I think her subject matter is something that, you know, resonates with my own. I also picked it because, so I didn't go to an MFA program, which is something a little unusual about me as a writer. I went to a PhD in literature program instead, but I was adopted into an MFA program very generously. My husband got his MFA at St. Joseph's in Brooklyn. It's called the Writers Foundry. And that community welcomed me in too, and is where we made some of our closest friends. And the director of that program is Lee Clay Johnson. Yeah. And the way I kind of got an entry into this program is that my husband was working for their lit mag and said they needed submissions. And so I submitted something and they published it and they had a reading. And so I read at it, and Lee was at that reading but didn't know that I was my husband's wife. Didn't know that I was Walker's wife. And so later basically was talking about it, being like, yeah, I really liked this short story about this person, you know. And Walker was like, well, I'm married to her, so do you have anything to pass along? And Lee had said, tell her to read Mary Gateskill, because that's the story that I had written was kind of a twist on a femme fatale story about a woman who'd been dumped and then kind of went searching for men she could sleep with. And so he was like, oh God, like because of that, she's got to read Mary Gateskill. So I went out and bought Bad Behavior, which is the book that I have here.
I love that.
Yeah, which is a collection of stories. And since then, I got to meet Lee and we've become friends. And anyway, I loved being adopted by their community. But Mary Gateskill is just a phenomenal writer. It's not actually in this collection, but there's a crazy short story she wrote in a different collection about a man who has a chance encounter with a woman on an airplane, and they're stuck together on this airplane talking to each other. And the encounter basically forces him to think back on a moment that he gang raped a woman previously. And like that's when I'm saying that Margaret Atwood doesn't pull punches. Mary Gateskill does not pull punches either. Her works are going to hit you with the realities of power dynamics, but never in an overly simplistic way. Again, the women aren't just recipients of abuse. They are often active in that abuse too. So the part I wanted to read was from a story actually about two women rather than a woman and a man. Okay. Yeah. So again, female friendships, can't help myself. So this is recounting the main character and her friend, Leisha, who have had a tumultuous relationship but are very close. Leisha is also currently in an abusive relationship with a musician. I think that's all you need to know. The first time the musician walked out, Leisha called her at 5 a.m, sobbing and pleading with her to come over. Susan got out of bed and took a cab down to 8th Street, where ghostly men and women were tipping over garbage cans to better examine the contents. She sat in Leisha's grandly rumpled, granule-ridden bed, holding her tight in her arms, as though the pressure of her grip should equal the intensity of Leisha's trembling. I feel so empty, Susan. I feel so rotten and empty inside. Susan kissed her forehead and stroked her hair and held her until her arms were sore, but she did not know what to say. Eventually, Leisha's trembling subsided and she slept, and Susan sat completely still, watching some fat, hideous pigeons stump around on a neighbor's filthy window ledge while Leisha's skin became stuck to hers and her limbs went gradually numb. Why did Leisha feel empty? What did empty mean? What should exist in Leisha that didn't? Was it a quality that other people had? She tried to imagine what Leisha looked like inside and pictured a set of dull-colored wires, some dead, others short-circuited and flickering in the dark, discharging a profusion of heat and bright color that sparked wildly, blew fuses, and went dead. Whew. More weird women.
You do, yeah. You've got a type. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy how like someone can listen to you read. This is what we were talking about earlier, even, eating barbecue is like a recognition of she should read this, because of the little I know about this person.
And he was so right.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people just get it, And I always think like when folks are quick to offer that up, and that's why I don't read everything everybody recommends to me, but there are a lot of people that it just feels like, I trust that they know where I need to be going, that I need to read this book. And this seems like spot on for you.
Yeah, he was right, because it's the kind of stuff I like to read, but it's also the kind of stuff I like to write. And I think I read a lot of stuff that isn't the kind of stuff I would write.
Sure.
But I think what's incredibly helpful from a mentor like that is someone who can identify what would be a good tuning fork text for you. Yeah. And this was a perfect tuning fork text to me. I mean, Gateskill's voice was great for me, but also her subject matter. And, I got to tell you, even if it's not Bad Behavior for you, you got to try a Mary Gateskill.
Well, I'll say this about this book. It has been similar to I was telling you but with Jen Fox and Tales the Devil Told Me. I did eventually pick that book up after months and months of staring at it every time I went into City Lights. This has been several bookstores. Because like when I travel for interviews, I buy at least one book at an indie bookstore, if not more. And it's almost like, I'm about to reach for it and grab it because there was something about it that felt like, oh man, I should give it a try. And I just have never actually taken it with me. So It's funny how these books that like you recognize as like, oh, I've thought about it a lot, but I just didn't do it for some reason. And then you get something that nudges you over the edge and it's like, this is what I needed to confirm that it was something I should read.
Yeah. And personally for me, I think she's one of the best writers of women.
Yeah.
But I think on a broader scale, she's just an excellent writer. Like, it doesn't surprise me at all that this recommendation came from the director of an MFA program, because you can't read her prose and find fault there.
As I said, I mean, you could tell me no story at all, and as long as it's written well, I'll read it.
Right.
I love that. So number 6?
Number 6, last one. This is like I know, but I'm doing it anyway. I just love Angela Carter. I just love Angela Carter.
This is about love. This is what we love to read. So
yeah, I love Angela Carter. This is The Bloody Chamber. And so maybe my most normie pick. I don't know. It's my normie pick. But I just love her. I love a good retold story. I think it's always nice to have some fairy tales, myth, legends, lores, whatever, on hand to flip through. Like, that's the bedside table book where it should be for any writer, because you can find the roots of something great in those stories. And they're so flexible that you can find new settings for them, new voices for them, new contexts for them.
Yeah.
And Angela Carter shows that. And to go along with my weird women, I mean, she also gives, she has the horror energy I love. She is going to get weird, but not unlike Mary Gateskill, she is always willing to think about how women are complicit in these systems, not just passive receivers of them. I adore her. And I start every fiction class I teach by having them close read the passage I'm going to read you. So
this is like being in your class, which is really all I want.
No, I mean, I hope my classes feel more like book clubs, but I'm such a sucker for this opening, because I was just saying that retold stories are flexible enough to do something new with. And so I love for my students to try to take a retold story like a fairy tale and set it somewhere that they know very well, that they can describe very distinctly. Because, there's the whole once upon a time in a kingdom far away generality to these stories. Angela Carter makes them so specific and sets such a scene immediately. She tells a story within her first 3 paragraphs every time. So I'm going to read the beginning of The Werewolf. It is a northern country. They have cold weather. They have cold hearts. Cold, tempest, wild beasts in the forest. It is a hard life. Their houses are built of logs, dark and smoky within. There will be a crude icon of the Virgin behind a guttering candle, the leg of a pig hung up to cure, a string of drying mushrooms, a bed, a stool, a table. Harsh, brief, poor lives. To these upland woodsmen, the devil is as real as you or I. More so. They have never seen us, nor even know that we exist. But the devil they glimpse often in the graveyards. Those bleak and touching townships of the dead where the graves are marked with portraits of the deceased, and there are no flowers to put in front of them. No flowers grow there, so they put out small votive offerings, little loaves, sometimes a cake that the bears come lumbering from the margins of the woods to snatch away. At midnight, especially on Walpurgisnacht, the devil holds picnics in the graveyards and invites the witches. Then they dig up fresh corpses and eat them. Anyone will tell you that. Wreaths of garlics on the doors keep out the vampires. A blue-eyed child born feet first on the night of St. John's Eve will have second sight. When they discover a witch, some old woman whose cheeses ripen when her neighbors do not, another old woman whose black cat, oh sinister, follows her about all the time. They strip the crone, search her for marks, for the supernumerary nipple her familiar sucks. They soon find it. Then they stone her to death. Winter and cold weather.
Good God.
That's the beginning.
Oh my God.
That'll fuck you up.
Oh my God.
And then there's a story, I guess.
How? How is that possible?
Yeah.
That is fucking incredible. You just gonna start the first few paragraphs like that and keep going on us?
I know.
That's nuts.
I read that, I'm like, if I wrote a paragraph like that ever in my life, I'd quit.
That feels like what a writer should strive for.
And all the beginnings are that good. I had to teach a different first passage this semester because I had a student take the exact same course again with me. And so I picked a different passage that she started a different retelling of Little Red Riding Hood. And it was just as amazing. It's like you understand the whole story in that one passage. So,
oh my God. And I just love To me, like, I love music, and especially with
Yes.
rap. I love the different ways that people use the like, just some are really like brief staccato type of rappers. Like Rakim talks about, he starts rapping like it's jazz when he was staring out a window in Brooklyn. And so, like, that's why there's this kind of jazzy swing to what he's doing. It's because that's his, like, ironically, the soundtrack to his rap is the saxophone.
Yes.
And so he's just starting, like, he's just looking at the hood. It really is what he's doing. And I remember, I'll never forget this interview. And so then I'm, like, recognizing where all those rhyme patterns that, like, literally I could not get out of my head came from.
Yeah.
And what the music was behind that. And there's certain times where she switches up the
rhythm. Yeah. I mean, we heard that in Randall Keenan's too. I think the rhythm is so strong, and that's why it's such a great close reading thing for students too, right? Is the syntax there of a bed, a stool, a table, harsh, brief, poor lives. Of course, it has to be staccato because their lives are staccato.
Yeah. Well, and I also like that line because of just a lot of what we've talked about. This isn't most of the history that,
Right.
all of these stories that are like beautiful and grand and adventurous and whatnot, but like that's most of life.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to give it away, but the ending of this book has that, the ending of the short story has that staccato too. And it's a brutal ending. And so that staccato
it would make sense for that ending.
Makes it clear. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's just like, it just brings you in. It's just so exciting to listen to that. That's a good one to pick for a class.
Yes.
Because I think that would excite students. It's like, oh shit, I would love to do that too. It's like, good luck, but
right. But it'll inspire you.
It is something to start. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like, I'm inspired. I'm never going to write anything like that, but I just like hope other people do too. I want you to strive for that. Yeah. That is incredible.
It's magic. Have you read Angela Carter?
I haven't.
Yeah. I think she's a good starting point because they're bite-sized. Like that story, there's only about a page and a half left to it. So it's a really good, like, if I just need to dip a toe in while you're reading your whatever 70,000 books that you have to read all the time, it's a good quickie.
The ones I haven't read that you've read from it really, like, that's why I love this selfishly. It's because I am thinking about what are the books that draw me in so much that I need to read them.
Well, and then you give us authors that gift too, right? Yeah. Because then you can give us books that we haven't read. And you do that. I'm so fortunate I get to have that anyway because I love City Lights and live nearby. But I remember doing that with The Strange Beautiful. Like you give me these recs and I get to have them on a weekly basis.
And I have yet another one ready for you.
Oh, yes.
Temporary. Well, you'll have to get that.
Okay.
So, and I'll tell you.
And the book that you told me about that's publishing soon that I am now obsessed with. Yeah.
Well, it's weird. Like even some of the things you were reading here and like talking about, I'm like, oh my God. Like I'm not saying I'm perfect with gift giving in this, but like I really try hard to think like, even if it's not directly related to the book you wrote, it's like, what would you enjoy? And this just feels like spot on. Girl's girl. There's going to be so
I'm
many.
Jazzed.
It just, there's a lot of connections. I'm wondering if you could read one more thing or if
yes.
Okay.
Sure.
And I don't want you to feel embarrassed by it because I need you to read it.
Oh, no. Now I'm nervous. Is it from my dissertation?
No, it's not.
Oh, thank God.
Because to me, it actually encapsulates why I think you'll love Girl's Girl.
Okay.
And sort of a strange, like, the ending of this connecting a little bit, at least in my mind, this is why it stuck out to what you write about in Westward Women. And we've talked about that. Like I mentioned that I read this.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
Are
this
you,
is, yeah, no,
are
this
you cool with reading it?
I'm cool with reading it.
Okay.
This is Mall
2004.
Yeah. A flash fiction piece I wrote. Yeah. It's hot outside. Too hot. Flip-flops melting into asphalt hot. Smells like gum and gasoline hot. So we go to the mall. We start with Auntie Anne's pretzels. The air there tastes like sugar butter, and it's right by the entrance, so we can stroll by nonchalantly, as if we hadn't been planning anything at all. If we're lucky, they'll be giving out free samples in little paper cups. We choose our cups with the biggest pieces of pretzel and suck the bread until it's nothing but the memory of salt. Then we say, we're full now. We don't need anything else. Next is cachet. Cachet, we all whisper to ourselves, like cash but fancy. The store has a wall of floor-to-ceiling display windows. Faceless white mannequins wear elaborate dresses, their hands held out for nothing, their petite wrists cocked just so. None of us have ever bought anything from Cachet. Our moms, with their mascara-caked eyes and sweat-stained 2 sizes too small t-shirts, don't shop there. We imagine movie stars, if our small suburban town had any, would shop there. Later, we will realize it's the Buena Vista neighborhood moms who buy those clothes, and that knowledge will make the shop villainous, their merchandise an evil stepmother's wardrobe full of false promises and betrayal. But for now, we assign outfits numbers and vote on the best ones. Most days, we don't actually like anything in the windows. But there's something about the way the dresses fall heavy, like drapery, around those shiny, thin bodies. There, behind the glass. We have to walk through the Macy's to get to the other side of the mall. We sweat as we make our way across the desert of white tile, past Clinique counters and moody perfume ads, perfect white teeth the size of our hands biting into plump red lips, non-existent breasts studded with bones, veiled in glitter, white-coated women behind the counters dab and spritz and cap. The room smells like highlighter and is filled with mirrors. We grab at free samples and run. The other side of the mall feels like a secret, like we've traveled through the looking glass. We each have a favorite place here. Claire's for the one of us who likes shiny, non-threatening earrings and clean, fur-lined pillows. Hot Topic for the one of us who collects pre-ripped t-shirts and easily broken studded belts. Charlotte Russe for the one of us who feels like she could punch a hole in someone's face with the heel of a stiletto. We claim them like they are the outcomes of the personality tests in the backs of magazines. This is me, we proclaim, tugging the others toward our storefronts. We may be us, but this one is me. Me, our arms strain. Me, our eyes burn. Me, our voices crack. We look at each other, wild-eyed and tense-limbed, our hands turned to claws. Doesn't this look like me? We beg each other. Doesn't it? Delirious, we stop at the food court to hydrate. It's a cavernous space where people's voices echo in a cacophony of fake sound. We forget our earlier promises that we don't need food and buy tray after sticky tray of the stuff. Greasy lo mein noodles, crusty tater tots, cold pizza with sheets of cheese, a dry-looking apple turnover origamied into a cardboard sheath. We eat it all, even after we are no longer hungry. Nearby, a woman at a kiosk stops ill-fated prepubescents, like us, to ask if they've tried Proactive Solution. We pick at the spots on our faces, poke the pooches in our bellies. Then we gather what we bought with money we saved from skipping school lunches, or stole from our mother's purses, or got for touching a boy's penis in the school bathroom. We don't tell each other these things. We drag purchases down a level, to the atrium. There's no reason to go to the atrium, but we do it every time. We are pulled here to the airy heart of the mall, like moths to a fluorescent light, or fingernails to a scab. In the atrium, the mall opens up to us. Escalators and elevators and walkways with glass railings careen and cross above us. We can see everything, but nothing sees us. In the center of the atrium, a carousel spins. Our cycling eyes trace its route, and our heads tumble into what feels like forever. The tinny, old-fashioned music makes our hearts ache for a time not so long ago when we would have ridden the carousel, let all the stores and the people blur together before our eyes. Now, instead, we look upward, to the heat pouring through the skylight. We squint up at the light from down in our pit. When we leave, we will return home to our mothers and sisters and grandmothers, to televisions that play reruns and sports highlights and George W. Bush's face. We will try on the things we bought here and look in the mirror and feel disappointed. Too fat, too short, too tall, too thin, too pale, too shallow-chested, thick-lipped, scar-skinned, bug-eyed, hunchbacked. We will bury that disappointment away with our purchases beneath our beds. We will not forget them, but imagine them dusted and molding, waiting for us like the monsters we once believed lived there. Years later, when we have left this town and bought houses and yoga mats and cars and stainless steel cookware and blouses that cost more than our mother's whole wardrobes, we will tell ourselves that we barely remember this place, each other, this feeling. But then it will come back to us, as deep as a breath, as hot as the sun burning invisible crowns onto our heads, and we will still be there, peering up through the escalators, our stomachs lined with grease, our muscles twitching with an ache we can't name. We will be drawn back here, searching for the bittersweet comfort of nostalgia, only to find a disappointment that had just begun.